Thank you all for joining us for this evening's event. My name is Nick, and I'm one of the events hosts here at Powell's Books in Portland, Oregon. Before we begin, I want to encourage you to check out our lineup of upcoming virtual events by visiting our website at powells.com. If you don't already do so, please follow us on our social media channels via Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. But tonight, we are so happy to welcome Gigi Pandian, Kellye Garrett, and Segura. Known for her wonderful and addictive characters, Gigi Pandian introduces Tempest Raj, her newest heroine in a heartfelt series debut. Under the Lock and Skeleton Key layers stunning architecture with mouth-watering food in an ode to classic locked room mysteries that will leave readers enchanted. In Kellye Garrett's new tense and twisting mystery, Like a Sister, no one bats an eye when a Black reality TV star is found dead in the Bronx, except her estranged half-sister, whose refusal to believe the official story leads her on a dangerous search for the truth. In Secret Identity, Segura uses his expertise as a comics creator as well as his unabashed love of noir fiction to create a truly one-of-a-kind novel, a rollicking literary mystery set in the world of comic books and hard-edged and bright-eyed, gritty and dangerous and utterly absorbing. This evening's event will include an audience Q&A, so please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen if you'd like to ask a question. As well, if someone has typed a question you'd also like to know the answer to, please upvote that particular question by clicking the thumbs up button. Lastly, support tonight's authors and Powell's by purchasing a copy of these authors' books from us. Links to buy Under Lock and Skeleton Key, Like a Sister, and Secret Identity will be shared in the chat a couple of times tonight, along with links to the authors' other books as well. All right, so Gigi, Kellye, Alex, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for hosting.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
So this is such a fun conversation for us to have because we're all friends who have our books out within a week of each other. So I'm so looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, it's gonna be great.
Me too, for sure. So.
I guess we should just go around the room and talk about our books, and if I can go first, if that's fine. Secret Identity, like they described, is set in 1975 New York City, and it tells the story of Carmen Valdez, who's a Cuban-American queer woman who moves from Miami to New York to pursue her dream of writing comics. She grows up reading comics. It's a strong tie to her parents and to Miami. She lands a job as a secretary at this company called Triumph Comics, which is a third-rate Marvel or DC. Like, they're striving to become big, but they just don't, they can't reach that level. And her boss is just a blowhard type who basically says, look, you're never going to get this opportunity to write. I have other plans for you. I have people I need to keep fed and keep busy. So just please stop asking me, which is dismissive, misogynistic, and just really unmoors her. And so when a colleague approaches her and says, I've got this opportunity to write this new female superhero, would you want to write it with me? The only twist is that you have to do it anonymously at first. Eventually we'll give you credit. Carmen is smart enough to see the red flags, but she also sees the opportunity, like the crack of light to achieving her dream. And so she goes in and she comes fully prepared with notebooks and ideas, and she writes this character called the Legendary Lynx, which is a street level crime fighter superhero. And it becomes a hit. They turn in 6 scripts, but she soon finds out that the 6 scripts were turned in under her colleague's name without her name on it, and her colleague has been murdered. So she has to basically investigate the crime of her friend's death and to solve, to figure out who killed her friend, but also to find out what happened to this character, to reclaim her character. And interspersed in the book between every few chapters are actual comic book pages drawn by Sandy Jarrell that tell the story of the Lynx in different stages of the story. So you kind of see how it's mirrored. Carmen's story is mirrored through her creation, the Lynx, and when she loses control as well. So that's it.
And I'm just going to jump to say one of the fun things about hearing Alex and Kellye talk about their books is that we all read early copies of each other's books, which was such fun. And so in addition to that, it's just really fun now to hear how we're all talking about it. So Kellye, do you want to tell us about Like a Sister?
Sure. So the idea for Like a Sister actually started with a New York Daily News headline. It said, pregnant former reality star found dead at 26 in Bronx with cocaine and no pants. And I just was in Tucson with Gigi at the Tucson Festival of Books. People were like, that's not a real headline. But if you've ever been to New York and you know the Daily News, that's very much on brand for them. So of course, me being a crime writer was like, ooh, that's a book. But the thing was, I could not figure out like how to get into the story because I'd come from writing amateur detective novels. So I was like, oh, should I do another series? Should I make it like a PI? What should I do? And I was walking down the street one day, getting grilled cheese for lunch. And I go, oh, she was going to see her sister and she never made it. And so that's Like a Sister. It's a story of Lena Scott. All she knows is that her estranged sister, who she hasn't spoken to in 2 years, was coming to see her at 5 a.m. and she did not make it. And she just does not believe that she just overdosed on a playground. And so she kind of she's forced to plunge into a life she doesn't want to deal with, which is her family life, because her sister is like this reality star. And her dad's this hip hop mogul who she kind of keeps at arm's length because she feels like when he left her mom when she was little, he also left her. So that's Like a Sister. What about you, Gigi?
So Under Lock and Skeleton Key is what I like to think of as a gothic cozy mystery. And so cozy mysteries are the lighthearted end of the mystery fiction spectrum, where you have a close-knit circle of friends and family and solving an amateur sleuth solving a mystery. And the gothic element is very much from the golden age of detective fiction and classic mysteries, when there would be overlaid that it looks like there's like a impossible crime stories that look like there's a supernatural explanation. And so I loved combining those two things. And an easy shorthand for that I wasn't sure at first if I wanted to talk about the book like this, but it really is true. And I love it. And if it's something, that folks would like too, then the book is for you, that it's kind of like Scooby-Doo for adults, that it seems like that there is, that there's something that seems like there's like a ghostly haunting, but really there's a rational explanation at the end. And it's a group of friends, Tempest Raj and her friends and family, who are solving this crime. So the setup of the book is that it's the first secret staircase mystery. And Secret Staircase Construction is no ordinary home renovation company, but they're a family business that builds magic into people's homes through things like sliding bookshelves, hidden staircases, secret gardens, through grandfather clocks that are more than they seem. So that's Tempest's family business, but she's 26 years old. She's, gone off on her own to do her own thing, and she's become a really successful stage illusionist in Las Vegas, until her career is sabotaged by, she's convinced that her stage double does it. So she moves back into her childhood bedroom and starts working for Secret Staircase Construction, but trouble follows her home. And her stage double is found dead inside a wall that's been sealed for a whole century. So it is an impossible crime, and it's up to Tempest to figure out if the Raj family curse really exists and has followed her wherever she goes, or if there truly is a rational explanation. And it's not a spoiler to tell you how it is, but can you follow the clues and figure out how it was actually done is the question. So yeah, it was a lot of fun to work on.
Sounds great. I think like you mentioned earlier, the cool thing is that we know each other so well. So it's kind of great to see each other's journey, because I know, Gigi, I met you, obviously I've read you, like I have, I think the like indie version of like your first book, but I think, did we meet at Malice?
It was Malice. Yeah, Malice Domestic. Yeah.
Like I think it was like my first Malice, my book hadn't come out yet. And I remember you're like, let's go to coffee. And I was like, what? Okay, let's go to coffee. And you're like just so nice. And you offered to like blurb the book. I just like,
yeah, no, and I was excited because I felt really lucky that I got an early copy of your book. Because so Kellye and I shared a publisher for our previous mystery series. And so we had the same editor as well. And so I asked if I could get an advanced reader copy, that I'd be happy to give it a blurb or like a book endorsement, to say, to go like on the book to say why I liked it. But so I, like, after reading about about it and about you, I was like, felt super lucky that I got to get this advance copy. And it was really great meeting you before that book was out.
It was, yeah, it was good coffee. You also asked me to join Sisters in Crime, so that was on the board. So
A very productive coffee.
exactly. My life changed with that one coffee. How do you guys know each other?
We
Was it
met,
BoucherCon?
and it was through Kellye because
Yeah.
we had heard about each other. Oh, and it was,
Yeah.
no, but actually, I don't think you had been talking about this awesome guy, Alex, who I had never met. But then Alex and I had a signing at BoucherCon at the Mystery Writers of America table. That was the first time, Alex, that I met you in person when we were there. And we're like, we feel like we should be friends already because we have, this mutual friend who we're both.
That's so funny because
Really
I felt
cool.
like we just kind of
Everyone
slid into this, like we were already like good friends. Like we
Yeah,
were chatting
yeah.
like we'd known each other for years. And Kellye and I knew each other, but I think the moment we became really good friends was through Twitter. You like slid into my DMs and we started chatting.
I go, can I ask you a question? He goes, yes, which is a mistake. Because now it's like 5 years later and every day I message him.
No, yeah, now we talk all the time. It's been amazing. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
so great.
So
And
we-
I mean, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh no, well, I was going to say that we could go on and on about our friendship for a long time, but I want to slightly pivot the conversation still about the group friendship, but really how our publishing journeys have also followed like kind of like a similar trajectory, that when we met, that we were all we had different series that we were working on. So if we just want to talk a little bit about our publishing journeys and really how much of a major moment this is for all of us with these books that are out this month.
Yeah, I mean, it's been amazing. We've said this to each other over email, but it's been amazing to ride along with both of you like so closely, to have our books come out together, but also to have them pitched together and sold together, and just to commiserate about the different ups and downs of this particular publishing journey, because we all started on indie presses. Like the first edition of Silent City was on such a tiny press that it didn't even have regular distribution. I had to lug books to bookstores and do all the publicity myself. And so even now I feel like I'm still getting used to, like Kellye hears this probably the most, like I'm still getting used to like having a team. Like I'm like, I need to check with this reporter, or I need to reach out and make sure this event is going to happen. And she's like, you have people for that now.
Let your team do it.
Yeah. And it's hard. And I think as indie authors, we get so used to like hustling over, not just the writing, but everything else. And so this is a big leveling up, I think.
Gigi, you have an interesting story too for your journey.
Yeah. So I mean, it's very similar, but I mean, also one of the interesting things about talking with other authors is that however similar some parts of our journeys are, like everybody's story is completely different from the beginning. And mine was very similar, that I started off much smaller than how this new series is coming out. But my publishing journey started off a little bit with a bang, that when I finished a draft of my first novel, I was so excited to have finished it that I submitted it to the Malice Domestic Grants competition, which fosters the next generation of traditional mystery writers. And I won their grant that year. So they pay for you to attend Malice Domestic, the traditional mystery convention. And so I went, and I didn't know anyone. I didn't know any mystery writers. I knew nothing about the business of publishing at all. And I felt like I had found kindred spirits when I went to Malice Domestic and met other mystery writers. And so it took me a few years to learn how to actually turn a good idea into a good book. And so I put in the time and the effort and got and wrote the book and got an agent relatively quickly. But my agent had a lot of trouble selling that first novel. And this was the first Jaya Jones novel, Artifact. And she was pitching it so she and I workshopped the book together too, even after I had, written it as best as I thought I could. But then she worked with me as an editor on that. And she was pitching it for a whole year. And because I think something we all share in common is that all of our books are not, they don't fit neatly into any mystery subgenre really, so they are a little bit challenging to market maybe, but then also I think that I know that that's what makes both of your books so special, that they're, not just like a straight thriller or straight noir or, historical or something like that. But so my agent hadn't been able to sell my book, and I took this as fate that I was in the hospital getting diagnosed with breast cancer the month after my 36th birthday, when I missed a call from my agent that it was time for plan B, to figure out what to do, because she hadn't been able to sell the books. So I decided that since I had a whole year of cancer treatments ahead of me, that I was going to self-publish the book, because my agent felt like it was ready. She was so surprised that it hadn't sold, that it wasn't the right timing and the right market, for that book. So I self-published that first book when I finished cancer treatments as a joint celebration. And then the book did well, but it was so much work that I was really thrilled when a small press picked up that book. And so I grew up this last decade with a couple of small presses with 2 series that I was really happy with, but also that it was just so much smaller than this, though. So I was with a small press when Kellye and I shared a publisher and first met then. So there's many great things that came out of that time, but it was a very winding journey to get here.
Yeah, I came out, I got my agent through a mentoring program that's no longer around, called Pitch Wars. And was with my book that became my debut, Hollywood Homicide. And so I got my agent 2015, and the same thing happened where it took over a year to sell it. I'm Black, I write Black people. And I think you can't not mention how publishing can be very, I'll say racist for lack of a better word. And so my book was a Black woman, although, and it might not have been traditional cozy, but it was like amateur detective, really funny, about this actress in Hollywood. And so after a year, luckily Terry Bischoff at Midnight Ink took a chance on it. And I always tell this story not to sound conceited or braggy, but my book took a year to sell, and when Terry bought it, we didn't get a lot of edits on it. And so that same book that took a year to sell won the Anthony, the Agatha, the Lefty, the Ippy Award for Best First Novel. And it got 2-star reviews, Publishers Weekly and Library Journal. And so I say that because I think a lot of times people want to be like, oh, if a person of color's book doesn't sell, they go, oh, maybe it just wasn't good enough. Right. And so I want to say the book that wasn't good enough for over a year ended up being good enough to win all these awards and get all these star reviews. So that was my journey. And it was similar where that was a smaller press. My book was like trade paperback, took a year to sell. And then now with the second one, we went out on proposal, and 5 days later we took a preempt. We were looking at like 5 offers. And so that was a completely different experience. And it's hard for me to even believe it, because I think in my mindset, I'm still the person who took a year to sell and no one wanted their book, so it's kind of amazing to me, like, oh, you guys actually want this? You really like it? Like, you're not just being nice. So
yeah. I think that sense doesn't go away easily. Like, I remember going through hundreds of agents and querying every single agent in the writer's marketplace and not having an agent. Basically my first Silent City version was almost self-published. Like it felt like a self-published book. So and one thing that we've all shared is that we've all became part of the community before we had a book. And I think that's a big thing I was a fan. I was going to BoucherCon as a fan to kind of see what this was about. And I know you all were too. So, can we talk a little bit about how the community's changed and how it's different from when we started? I mean, whoever wants to go first.
I will go first. I when I started, like 5 years ago, there weren't a lot of people of color getting published in crime fiction. We were writing it, Gigi had her books. Alexia Gordon was the year ahead of me with her Black Woman Cozy, and then my year Valerie Burns and Patricia Sargent came out. I think Vivian Chin came out too, and so now, like, you kind of see they're actually looking for diverse cozies and looking for millennial cozies, and looking for all this stuff that they were not looking for 5 years ago, and so I'm excited that they're finally, embracing diversity, but they were embracing diversity in the 90s, and then they weren't. And so I just don't want it to be a trend. I want it to be status quo. So I'm kind of excited, but also very tentatively excited. So.
Yeah, and I am very hopeful that it is not just a trend, because the books are so good. And I feel like they just needed to get a chance to be given a chance to get out there, and readers are I mean, readers don't just read narrowly, but especially mystery readers read voraciously. And there are so many great books out there now that, yeah, I'm really hopeful for the future of mystery fiction.
Yeah, I think when I started, I felt very isolated at least in terms of the subgenre of PI fiction. Like there were not a lot of diverse PI stories being written. And I wrote the Pete books because I wanted to see a character like me in that role, as opposed to like the sidekick or like the supporting cast member. And now it's so amazing to see so many, because that's what gets people to do it. When you start seeing yourself in those stories, you start to want to tell those stories.
Representation matters.
Yeah.
And it is something that, I mean, I didn't know what I was missing when I was young until now, that I feel like like it's so much more fulfilling to have all of these great books out there. But when I was a kid and reading, I loved mysteries ever since I was a kid. And I just thought about that's just what it is, that's what's there, that there weren't people that look like me and my family in these books that I like to read. And so I still loved the books, and they're amazing books, but it's just now. So when I started writing, I of course I wasn't thinking about it consciously, but when I wrote Jaya, so I just had an Indian American heroine because that's, my experience. And so that's what I wanted to create, it like this diverse set of characters in all of my books. And so because that was that was the people around me in my life, and that I was able to add those into my fiction. And now that I get to read that so much more widely now too, is just really exciting.
And it's funny, I think that sometimes people think that we should all be in competition with each other. But to me, it's like, I think of a victory for one of us is a victory for all of us. So like, you guys selling your books is going to help other people, or like Sean Cosby, S.A. Cosby's book being a New York Times bestseller is going to help all of us. And Mia Mon and Sala having the biggest, cozy debut of the year last year with Arsenic and Adobo is going to be great, because they're all opening doors. It takes all of our hands to break that glass ceiling, and it's funny because I think we saw it last year, like 2 years ago. We were all on sub when like July, like summer of 2020. I think I kind of shared my experience, but you guys kind of feel like how was your experience when you guys were on sub this last go around?
I mean, I reached the point, I knew what I wanted my next book to be, and I wrote the Pete books, and I knew what it was going to be before I even started the 5th novel. And so Secret Identity was always in my mind, and I played the long game kind of, but not intentionally. Like I knew Zach at Flatiron was the perfect person because he loved comics. He had that literary like taste, but I didn't want to write another novel on spec. And I thought, okay, I've written 6 of them at that point. I'd written the Star Wars novel, so I wrote a partial, and we had the comic page created, and Josh, my agent, was very much like, you have to finish the whole thing. You should finish the whole novel and sell the whole novel. And I was like, at what point do I get to not do that? Like, and I don't mean, like I said, I don't want to sound conceited, but I was like, I've written 6 and they've done okay. Like I wrote a Star Wars, like, at what point do I have to like, can I just like, do people know what I can do? And so he did it. And I think Kellye, we were in the same boat, like literally like live conversation about how we were in this process. And he sent it to Zach exclusively, and Zach took it. And I was like, it felt like a real blessing, because it almost felt like I had planned it and I hadn't, but it just worked out in a nice magical way.
Yeah, no, and I didn't realize, because Kellye and I were talking about this too before, but I didn't realize that yours was just on proposal too. So Tempest story was as well, but a little bit differently though. So I have been working on the book that became Under Lock and Skeleton Key for 6 years now, because Tempest is a character who I initially wrote a short story about many years ago. And I loved her, and she demanded that I do something else with her, but I didn't know what yet. And so 6 years ago, I started writing the book that became Under Lock and Skeleton Key, but I didn't know how to tell Tempest story, because there was so much, as I mentioned in the little intro description about the book, there were so many different elements. There's a family curse, there's all these Gothic settings and all of the architecture, and it's a locked room mystery puzzle. So those are those impossible crime stories that, it really looks like it is impossible. So it's like a puzzle that you have to put together. And there was so many elements of the large cast of characters that were really central to Tempest's friend and family unit. And there was just so much going into that book that it did feel like a bigger book than my earlier books. And I love all of my earlier books, but this one I really needed more time to figure out how to wrap my head around. And I actually did try writing a full draft of the novel as a thriller. And it turns out I am not a thriller writer. It is not my voice. It was terrible. I learned so much from writing it in that process though, but it was just, the voice just came out all wrong. And it was only when the pandemic happened in early 2020 that I had a book research trip planned to travel abroad to research a different book, that trip got shut down for later that spring. And so I went back to Tempest, who had been waiting for me to figure out how to tell her story. And just, I'm also not a writer who usually writes at home. I usually go out to cafes and other places and I can't concentrate at home. But of course we had to learn how to write at home. So I carved out this little section of my house and I went all in, and it clicked. It finally clicked that I needed to be true to my voice and that it was a cozy mystery, or my own spin on that, which is a gothic cozy mystery. And as soon as I realized that, it all fell into place. The story had a lot of similarities to the thriller, but told in this way. And so I just wrote up a few sample chapters and I had the whole story figured out and all of the characters who I loved. I sent that to my agent. She had me make a few tweaks, but then she went out and sold that on, that went to auction with different publishing houses being interested in it. So I felt like I'm really glad that I stayed true to my voice and what I wanted to do, even though for the longest time that wasn't working for me. But we do have to write our passions, I think, because that's what comes through. And eventually that is what is going to have a book that does really resonate with readers too, because our passion for it comes through on the page.
Yeah, I think the obsessions have to really, really drive you. Did you want to talk a little bit more about your submission process, Kellye, or?
I said it all.
Okay. Because that's the fun part. The then comes the actual finishing of the book, which is really challenging.
I mean, you got some, well, because you sent it to one person. I did not find it's so funny because I feel like the dream is like, because here's the thing with sub, for people who don't know, like there's no time frame, like Gigi was saying, like it could be, you could go on submission with your book. Submission is when your editor sends your book out to all these, your agent sends your book out to all these editors. So someone could read it and love it tomorrow and want to buy it, or they could never want it, or it could be like a year down the line, like me and Gigi, like, before. And so like the dream is to have someone like want to buy it right away. And what I thought like going to auction would be so much fun and everyone wants it. I was stressed the hell out, like, because you have to have calls with all the editors and they were all so nice to me and I felt bad. I was like, I could only choose one of them, the rest of them are gonna hate me. Like,
it's so flattering though.
And so like I loved everyone I talked to, but like I'd always had a crush on Mulholland. I like that they've always published diverse. It's not just a recent thing because of George Floyd in 2020. And so I was just super excited to go with them. And I was like, well, hey, let's just do the preempt instead of me like stressing myself out about it. So that was not what the experience I thought it was going to be.
that was a great stretch of time, just like win after three, like wins and big highs. And, publishing is so many highs and lows. And I think the writing comes with a lot of lows and challenging moments. Like, for me, like Gigi, like you were saying, Secret Identity was a leveling up. It was a book that I was thinking about for years and years. It was like literally an idea I had, not knowing it was going to be a book 20 years ago. Like I was in college reading Cavalier and Clay and just thinking like, whoa, it'd be cool if there were comic pages in this book about comics. I just didn't think I was going to be the one that wrote it. But I think also I'd only always written directly from my experience, like the male Cuban American experience. And Carmen had shown up to me in such a clear way that I felt almost disingenuous not writing to who she was and who she appeared to me. But I also had to do a lot of work to make sure that voice was true, and a lot of work that I didn't normally, when I write Pete, I just write Pete because I know how he is. And so it became a really, really, journalistic, but also additive experience. I had a lot of sensitivity readers. I had a lot of beta readers just to make sure that I was in the wheelhouse of what you know, that experience is like. And that was new to me. And I also found that it was important to be as honest and transparent as possible during that journey. So, you know, at the end of the day, the readers will determine whether it's good or not, but I felt confident that I went through the process the right way, it was challenging in that way, that it wasn't just purely like sitting and writing the story.
It will resonate with the readers, because I remember like one of the things in all fiction, but especially in mystery fiction, I feel like, is that end resolution is so important to make sure that the whole story holds together, that aha moment at the end, and that all of the pieces come together. But I loved how Carmen's story came together at the end of that book. Even before the last chapter, you had already brought so much together. And then really, I'm not going to give a spoiler, but I'm just going to say, when you get to the end, and then the end of Secret Identity, it's one of those books that it just brings everything full circle. And I couldn't stop thinking about it after after that ending. So I know that readers will feel the same way. So
that's good. What about you guys? What challenges did you run into in the writing?
So for me, I had come from writing a series, and I had started my series in 2011. And so this was like 2018. So I'd spent like 7 years of my life just focused on like 5 characters. And so this, like a sister, is a standalone, and it's all new characters. And like, I had to figure who they were. And I think my struggle was, because my series was a lighter tone and heightened reality funny. This has humor in it, but it's way more serious. Like I'd always default to Dana, or like, oh, Dana would do something really wild, like sneak into this place and, you know, and eavesdrop, but Lena would not. And so I'd have to be like, Kellye, like, you have to, this is who you're writing for. You're writing Lena, you're not writing Dana. That was a struggle. But it's funny because now I spent 4 years with Lena, I'm working on a new book, and now I have to get out of Lena's head and be with this new character. So I guess that's the fun of standalone. So
yeah, so I am going to, before answering that for myself, I'm going to fangirl about Kellye's book, Like a Sister, for a moment too, because
so good.
It is so good. But one of the things that I so appreciate about Like a Sister, as that I consider it in like the thriller suspense, you know, corner of the mystery world. But in addition to, so this is actually a challenge with reading your book too, but that I loved, is that I wanted to keep like turning pages quickly to find out what was going to happen. But your writing, just your literary style of writing, it's just so good. There's so many like lines, you know, that I wanted to be, you know, like, and also you knew this because you on leading up to the book release, like just little snippet teaser of lines from the book.
Those were fun.
Because it's so good, like the writing of it. So I can both fangirl like that, but also segue into my own challenge. I think of myself much more as, I love creating like classic mystery puzzle plot type things, that you really do have things that you could theoretically, the reader, hopefully they won't, but the reader could solve, because I have, you know, like laid out enough clues and things. So I love my characters and my plots and settings and things like that. But the writing itself, like turns of phrase that are beautiful, like that is not what I do. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I want the language to not be clunky, but I don't want it, you know, so I need to really work to make sure that I have things so that the language is invisible, so that you get caught up. I love writing dialogue because I love my characters and all of their, and this is a new series. So like, I do get to have time to get to know my characters across books. And so I love writing their dialogue. That comes really natural to me. And I have, because I love really strong settings. So describing all of the architectural details. And also there's Tempest's grandfather is a chef who cooks for the family business and brings them lunch every day, which is one of the perks for working for Secret Staircase Construction. So I love cooking myself too. And so I love being able to add those food details and the family and the dialogue and all of that stuff, and getting all the plot details hidden in there. But the language itself, which both of you are so good at, that's actually the most challenging part of writing for me, that I can figure out everything else, but then I have to make sure that the writing can be seamless enough that it doesn't, that people aren't stumbling over the language. So I work on that enough that I hope that doesn't seem clunky at the end.
No,
not at all.
But that's the last thing like that comes to me. Like that's what I have to be working towards at the end to make sure that that's as good as the rest of the book.
Yeah, I mean, you just saying that made me feel much less alone, because I feel the same way. Like I'm a
Oh,
big
really? See, I wouldn't
yeah.
know that from reading your books. Okay. So
No,
that's great.
I'm a big plotter, and then I really spend time on the language and the final revisions to have those turns of phrase, and then there's always like those lines that you're proud of, like in the prologue. There's Carmen is a young girl and she crawls up like a cat wiggling through a fence, like little things. Those come at the end. Like you're putting up the kind of the tent poles first, and then adding the rest. But yeah, totally, I could really relate to what you said. And I think one thing that we all agree on and share is that we're fairly active in the community. I mean, you both are co-founders of Crime Writers of Color. I'm an active member, I think it's safe to say, and I do a lot of readings and organization stuff for the community. I was on the board of MWA. But that's also a double-edged sword. Like you give so much time, to help others, which is great, but sometimes it's finding that balance, which is hard. I find it hard to do sometimes, but I want to talk a little bit about that and how you find ways to give back, but also not take away from your own creative time.
Gigi, you want to go first?
Well, I will dive in to say I love being part of the mystery community. So Crime Writers of Color, Sisters in Crime, Mystery Writers of America, and local writers groups. And that is such an important part of writing, because both to be able to give back now that I've been doing this for a decade and can help others more, but also just because writing can be so isolating that it, like, I don't know that I would stick with it if I was just all alone and didn't have you two and, so many other writer friends. But I also do have to be really protective of my writing time. So my big secret is this doesn't work all the time, but if I'm working on a book, seriously, I do not go online until I've gotten my writing for the day done. So I do get up early. I know, Kelly's looking horrified, but this is why I'm so unresponsive. Don't hate me. Like if you're, like if people,
I admire your discipline.
I'll email back 5 hours later. No, but I don't. So the two things though, to actually make that work, because it is tempting. We are online, we are also connected, which is wonderful. Like how we can do this event, and see folks all over the world, just from just from home. But also I have a program called Focus that kicks me offline so that I can't just look something up. Because if you try to look something up for 30 seconds, you'll still be online 30 minutes later, and that is no good to anyone. But I have that. But then I also, not only do I put my phone in the other room, but sometimes I'll actually hand it to my husband so that I cannot go get it to do anything. Because he knows if I've done that, I need to stay focused on writing. And then in case my phone starts buzzing with an emergency, he'll have it so I can have that peace of mind. If there's an emergency, he can still see that. But I can't go online, because otherwise I'll be able to give proper attention to the community and my job and my life and everything else after getting writing done.
It used to be for me, like I used to commute I live in Jersey, and I used to commute to New York. And so I used to actually do a lot of that type of stuff on my phone. Like I'd respond to emails about volunteer stuff and message and DM and things like that. Of course, now it's a pandemic and it's been 2 years of in my house. That's been tricky, but I've just gotten better with saying no to stuff I don't want to do. I've just gotten better at it. And it's so Crime Writers of Color is an organization that Gigi and I co-founded with Walter Mosley. And we started in June of 2018 with about 30 people. Alex, one of the first members, and now we have over 350. And we have a lot of great stuff. We have a podcast, we have a list of speakers, we have a books page, we have social media stuff, we have, we're doing an event at BoucherCon. We're doing all this great stuff. We have a newsletter that goes out to indie bookstores, all this really amazing stuff. We have a column in Kings Rivers Life magazine, things like that, but it's all because someone volunteered. And I think it's funny because Gigi and I don't really when it comes to actually stuff involved with Crime Writers of Color, I don't really actually do the stuff, and so I think that's helped too. And I've gotten really good at that, where it's someone offers we should have this in the group. I'm like, oh, do you want to do it? Versus being okay, well, let me go figure it out. No. And we're lucky that we have so many amazing people who want to help each other out. Because again, it's that community feeling of once when one of us succeeds, we all succeed. And so we just have like really amazing members. Like Alex is a conference liaison, so he talks with a lot of conferences to help them, you know, be more inclusive. So
Yeah, I think the challenge is research is a abyss I fall into all the time. And I think, like Kellye was saying, when you write more, you get that shorthand. I just block things out on that first draft, and instead of actually doing the research or like falling into the internet hole. But with commitments like Cooperatives of Color and other orgs like Sync and MWA, like I'm really bad at saying no. Like I'm not good at it. It's my burden, and I've had to like really learn how to do that. 7 books in, like how to say no, or at least maybe later. I've gotten really good at the maybe later, but it's hard. It's finding that balance. It's a perpetual struggle for me. Not to be the bummer of the 3.
I think we're almost ready for questions, right?
I think we're at almost 45 minutes after. We could keep rambling, but I think there are a bunch of questions too.
Well, can I just can you quickly guys tell me what you guys are working on next before we get the questions in?
Yeah.
Alex, go.
Okay.
Go for it.
No.
We just announced that I'm working on a sequel to Secret Identity. We haven't, it's going to be set in the modern day, and Carmen is going to be a character. She's not going to be the protagonist, but she will be a key part of the story, and it will involve the Lynx in some way. And the protagonist is a cartoonist who kind of got burnt on mainstream comics and made a career for herself, doing like New Yorker style cartoons, and really carved her own path. And there's a social media wave demanding that she try and kind of take part in this relaunch of an obscure 70s character that nobody'd really heard of called the Legendary Lynx. And she's a fan of the character, so she does it. But as she starts working on the project, she starts getting these mysterious messages, like these anonymous messages telling her, you should really look into the origins of this character because it's not what you think. And so she kind of becomes this amateur sleuth to figure out the true origins of the Lynx and why people are trying to keep it a secret. So
I love that world is continuing. That makes me so happy.
Oh, good.
And my news is similar, that I recently turned in the second book in the Secret Staircase mystery series. And it's another impossible crime story. All of the books in the series are going to be locked room mysteries. So, and this one though, I'm so happy that I pulled it off. My early readers and my editor think I pulled it off, that it's 1 murder, but 4 impossibilities having to do with this murder. And there's a fake seance that hides a very real crime. And Tempest also gets closer to solving the mystery of what happened to her mom, who disappeared 5 years ago. So that's something that is an ongoing side story that for the Raj family curse, that Tempest at the end of the first book in the series, that she has solved her own mystery, but her mom's mystery still remains. So I'm really excited.
One of the things I loved about your book was like the mom and the sister, and I'm like, what's going on? I need to know. And then I wanted to, oh no, I thought it was a spoiler. Never mind, I'm not gonna spoil it. You guys gotta read it.
Yeah, you gotta read it.
So for me, about 4 years ago, I was invited to do a writer's retreat at a friend's house in Baltimore. She was not in town, and she had this beautiful 4-story row house. And I remember thinking I could go downstairs one day and I could find a dead body in the foyer and have no clue how it got there. And the neighbors would be like, who is this and why did she kill somebody? So that's the idea for my next book. It's about this Black woman who comes to Jersey City in New Jersey for a romantic getaway with her boyfriend. And she comes downstairs one day to find her boyfriend gone and this missing white woman in her foyer. And it's called Missing White Woman. Right, very on point. It's kind of similar. You think of like the Gabby Petito case and how like that kind of like took over the world, I feel like, for like a month, and like they had all these internet sleuths. And the thing with the internet sleuths is that they don't have to actually be accurate. They can just stow things, just say whatever they want, their theories, and it can cause problems. I remember when they found the guy, her boyfriend's body, they were like, please don't disturb the crime scene. Like they make an announcement to the police, like, don't disturb let the officers work, because people were so involved in trying to be amateur detectives. So that's
Wow.
That's kind of what the book's about, that I'm very far behind.
Okay, yeah, so let's dig into the questions here if you're all ready. The first, here's a question from Calvin Evans, and Calvin asks, and for all of you, this question, have you ever tried or considered writing books beyond mystery, as in different genres such as contemporary fiction or YA? So I'll put that one.
I mean,
Kill somebody.
I've written all over the place. I've written graphic novels, YA novels. My Star Wars novels technically YA because it's Poe Dameron when he's younger. So, I mean, mysteries are my main through line, but I like to be flexible.
Excellent. Okay.
Yeah, mystery for me too, because I love reading mysteries, and I do read more widely than mystery, but probably 75% of what I read is mystery. And I've actually tried to write a couple of things that weren't mystery, and a mystery found its way in there. So maybe I'll write those ones. Yeah, I have lots of notebooks filled with ideas for things. I just wish I had time to write more things, but they'll all be mystery in some form. They'll all be mystery.
Excellent. All right, cool. So another question here we've got from Catherine Matsumoto, which you've talked about this a little bit, but was the pandemic lockdown a productive time for the three of you?
It's difficult to juggle things when everything is at home.
Yeah.
But I feel like for me, I also did find my groove. And once I figured out how to stay offline and focus, I felt it really was a blessing to have these books that I loved that I was working on. So I've written a few things during the pandemic. I've written another Accidental Alchemist novel, and I wrote this book and the sequel. So I've written probably like a book every, 6 to 9 months. So hopefully when I go back out traveling and things, I want to stay as productive. But yeah, so that's a silver lining of the pandemic for me, is once I figured out how to throw myself into writing, it was really great.
Yeah, I used to, I live in Jersey, I work in New York City. So my commute was like an hour at least. So I'd be gone from my house from like 7 to 7 every day. And so it was nice to like have those 2 or 3 hours where I could actually like use that time to write. So it's definitely been productive. I'm about to go back to work hybrid though. So we'll see how it goes, guys.
Yeah, definitely getting the commute time was great, and just having flexibility because you're home, if things are quiet, you can kind of pivot and do something else. But the pandemic itself, just being real, was not great for just my anxiety level, and just having two small children who couldn't be vaccinated, one until very recently, and just, it was just a lot. So I found great solace and escape in work. I'm pretty productive by nature. Like I write fast. I don't have a lot of hobbies. Like I also feel like my hobby became my job, and that's like that's what I'm grateful for, that I can do this thing I love, and I would have done it for fun and for free. So yeah, I like Gigi. I think I wrote like 2.5, 3 books in the pandemic, which is great, but it was definitely more productive than I thought I would be.
I do have to say, I do miss having a commute though on the train, because that I can't read on a train, but I can write in my notebook if I don't read it back. So I miss that just mental downtime of being on a train for half an hour, just be able to write my thoughts in a notebook when I can't do anything else. So I do miss that transition, period of time, between home and being away from home. So yeah, I do miss it.
Excellent. So Steve Hawkins-Smith asks the question.
Steve, he was a Midnight Ink author.
Yeah. Hey, Steve.
So Steve's wondering if you for all of you, are you planning on attending Left Coast Crime or BoucherCon, or doing any live events, or are you still being cautious about that? Have your publishers encouraged you to do live events?
I'm actually Toastmaster for Left Coast Crime. For those that don't know, Left Coast Crime is one of we have like about 3 major reader mystery festivals. There's Left Coast Crime, there's BoucherCon, there's Malice Domestic. And so I'm actually going to all 3 of them this year. But I'm
I didn't know you were coming to Malice too. Yay.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm supposed to say it, but I'm gonna interview Walter for his guest of honor. So I'll just be there Saturday.
Awesome.
So yeah, so I'm gonna be there. So but Left Coast is in April, 7th, Gigi? Like around the second weekend in April. And it's in New Mexico, and it's gonna be like the first time in 2 years that the mystery community has all gotten together. So I'm expecting it to be fun. So yeah, definitely come to New Mexico if you guys especially you, Steve, if you guys want to. So.
Yeah, no, and I'm doing hybrid. I'm doing some things like this great online event and things in person. I have I have good masks, so to travel safely, and but I'm excited to be venturing out into the world.
Yeah, I'm being pretty cautious just with my kids. So I had to turn some stuff down in person, but Kellye and I did a great launch event yesterday. That was my only in-person event at the Strand. But I'm hopeful that I'll be at BoucherCon this year and some other book festivals towards the end of the year.
Gigi and I were just in Tucson at the book festival. So now we're taking COVID test every day.
All right, so the next question comes from Suzanne Vondry Kossis. And Suzanne asks, says, I love Gigi's Jaya Jones travels to cool locations. Have you been pressured to follow mystery formulas? For instance, do editors and publishers expect your main characters to be amateur sleuths, or do you always have to have a murder?
So I am probably in the minority here in this answer I'm going to give of writers, but I don't always have a murder in my mysteries. And I don't know, I think that some publishers put more pressure on their authors to do that than others. But for me, having a mystery is very central, but I've been given a lot of leeway to do whatever that means, whatever story I want to tell. And one of my editors said to me once, so I was, for a series book I used to write, I had turned in an outline to sell the series, and I wrote a book that was like, it's not even different than the outline, but it was completely unrecognizable. It was a completely different book. But my editor said that I got away with it, and she loved it because what I wrote was better than the outline. So if you do something well, I think you can get away with a lot. So if you're being true to your vision of what you're writing, and I know not everyone will be lucky enough to have that experience, but I've had the experience that if I'm true to what I'm doing and do it really well, then I can get away with telling the story that I want to tell.
Cool. Yeah, good. I guess, so another question, this one's from Alyssa Matras. And she asked it for Gigi, but you can all answer if you like. It's for Gigi. But which golden age of mystery writers do you admire?
Golden age mystery writers. I sound like a broken record if you've heard me at any other events, because my absolute favorite is John Dickson Carr, who was the master of locked room mysteries. And actually, Alex and I were just talking about this. I wrote an essay about him for Crime Reads that was just published that talks about how his style of locked room mysteries inspired what I think of as my Gothic cozy voice, because he really layered in all of these wonderful Gothic stories and made things seem impossible. But then you have your, Scooby-Doo for adults, version of, I'm sure John Dickson Carr fans are going to cringe at that, but that's what I take out of it. Yeah. So, but there's rational explanation. And so he does brilliant puzzle plotting, but also with that atmosphere. So John Dickson Carr is my absolute favorite Golden Age author.
Excellent. So Catherine Matsumoto writes again. She actually, I think we may have actually shared this, or might have to share it. She has, does Crime Writers of Color have a newsletter that we can subscribe to? Something for readers, not for writers.
Technically we do. I don't think we've sent something in a minute, but if you go on our website, crimewritersofcolor.com, I think Jen Chow put it in the chat. Hi, Jen.
Yeah, it's down there.
There's a newsletter sign up sheet, but yeah.
But you can also look on the website we do have like a list of recent books and books in different mystery subgenres there on the website. So even if you're not getting regular newsletters, you can check by the site and see all of the great books by members that are up there.
Yeah, and it's great because it's by ethnicity and it's also by subgenre. So
yeah, so definitely go check that out if you want down there. It's in the chat we have under there, and I can maybe share it again too. Oh yeah, good.
Yeah. Thanks, Jen.
So I'm gonna go ahead. So Carol Fairweather asks a question and has asked, do you dream about your characters?
I don't, no. I think about them a lot, but I don't dream about them. I wish I had some flash of brilliance in the middle, like while
I
was
know that would be
sleeping.
so helpful.
Yeah. I've heard some authors say that they'll think about it, something they want an answer to, and they'll wake up with it. I am not that lucky.
Maybe I'll try it tonight.
Yeah.
Tell us if it works.
I'm gonna let you guys know. We'll come back next week, pals, and that's my dreams.
I just think about them a lot, and I make playlists, and I do like, I guess, vision boards or Pinterest things like to help me just visualize the world, because that helps me. But I wish I could dream about them, because some of my anxiety dreams are pretty mundane, like when being back in high school at my age.
Alex's birthday was yesterday.
Yeah.
Happy day after your birthday.
He got a book birthday and a real birthday on the same day.
Yeah.
This was my present.
Up top, I have another question from Calvin Evans. He says, for Gigi, first, love the Alchemist series. Zoe Faust. Yeah, Zoe Faust is one of my favorite literary characters. And he asks, is your new book going to be a lengthy series?
Yeah, so I hope that they are both going to be very lengthy series. What I love to do is, because I love my characters so much, but I don't want to get sick of them either. I love switching between projects. So as soon as I finish a draft of one series book, I can set it aside and let it breathe, because when I come back to it later, I'll see things I didn't see before and be able to make it even better. But once I've handed off that draft to my critique partners, I can then dive into working on the other series. So I'm really loving switching between the two series, but I really hope that they are both going to be long running, because I love them both.
Excellent. Cool. An anonymous attendee says,
I like it. I like it.
Yeah. The mystery.
Fighting. What they want to know. Anonymous.
Yes. So yeah, the anonymous, they ask, do you have a time or word limit you set yourself daily in your writing?
I usually try to write a chapter at least, but I'm not a writer who writes every day. And I think you don't think you have to be. Obviously, you should work on your book and write more than you don't write, but I don't think you need to write every day. So
yeah, I agree with Kellye. I don't have a set assignment, but I do know if I'm slacking, so I can kind of nudge myself to write. I think the idea of 1,000 words a day makes you a writer is a limiting proposition, and it kind of boxes people out of thinking they're writers. And I think you can define yourself how you choose, and if you're doing the work or not. So
yeah. And I don't have a certain thing that I have to accomplish every day, but I'll just give myself whatever chunk of time I have that I'm completely offline and focused. And most of the time that ends up being enough to meet my deadlines. But sometimes for the last week, I'm in a panic trying to bring everything together. And it works out because it's so when you're so immersed in the story, then that I'll be working 24/7, right towards a deadline, and then just waiting for my subconscious to bring those last elements together that haven't yet come together. And so far it's worked. So fingers crossed that it keeps doing so.
Excellent. Well, I think we're getting to the end of our hour here. And so I just want to thank you all so much for joining us today, and for all the conversation, all the question and answers, and all that talk about. So thank you so much for joining us. Everyone out there, please consider purchasing copies of Underlock and Skeleton Key, of Like a Sister, and Secret Identity. We put links in the Powell's in the chat right there, and they're available. So please seek those out. And while you're there, please check out our upcoming lineup of virtual events. And we look forward to seeing you at another one of our events very soon. So
thank you for having us.
thanks so much. This was really fun.
Thanks so much for hosting.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Good to see everybody.
Bye.
Bye, all.
Bye. Bye.